Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew,
And I'm Dustin Rea.
and today we're going to talk about how AI is shifting careers, and specifically my career and Dustin's career. So, Dustin, we were chatting just a bit earlier about AI and how it's had all these paradigm shifts and how we work on our day-to-days. I had some ideas from how I've experienced it on the day-to-day at work and how products has changed a little bit and how engineering has changed. But I wanted to hear a little bit about yours because it sounds like everything's changed for you.
Yeah. I think everything has changed for me, and I don't want to sound like dramatic AI shot from the rooftops kind of thing. But I think it's just that you know looking at the tools for what they are, and finding how do you get the leverage out of it. And I think that's what like we're supposed to do as entrepreneurs, engineers, capitalists, whatever you want to say. So that's just kind of how I'm looking at it. One thing that's definitely changed for me is it's kind of changed the way I approach my business model as a consultant and as an agency. One thing that is strikingly different is it was very common in the industry to charge like by the hour for development services in the past, and people still do that. But there's clients that I'm working with on kind of a specific basis where I'm working on multiple clients' projects at the same time using AI models, and I can have the agents essentially working on different projects at the same time. So like the hourly model, for example, just doesn't work there, right? So it's like, who are you actually billing at any one time? So I think that's kind of an interesting shift. Yeah. And what really makes all of that possible, you may say, like, how can you even maintain like the context and all these different things? And I think just like in real estate, they say cash is king. My argument is in software, context is king. So I think, spending the time ahead of doing the actual agent work, that is where the actual like sauce is in today's world. So I've seen a lot of my workflow shift from spending a lot of time in the editor working on code to now a lot of my time is just spent on the planning phase, getting requirements, doing technical constraints for like the agents, like kind of all of that stuff that you would maybe even do if you were training new developers or bringing, onboarding new developers to your team. So it feels a lot more like that. And then, of course, the review phase at the end. So it feels like what used to be the 20% at the beginning and the 20% at the end is now like the 50% at the beginning and the 50% at the end, if that makes sense.
So would it be fair to say that for the hourly thing that you brought up, the planning for the context is still closer to that model because you could spend a couple of hours setting the context for client A and then spending more times, a couple hours for client B. It's just that once you get to this implementation phase, since you can do things in parallel, you can have two different agents going and say, hey, now that I've got this criteria defined, I'm going to pass this off to you, start coding for me, and then walk away. And you're essentially working for two clients at the same time because you have the models working at the same time. And that's shifted how you approach it. And like you mentioned, like the last part is the review cycle. So you still have to review what
Right.
the models generate. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting point about the idea of parallel work there. So what you
hmm
can parallelize, but the context you can't quite yet. It sounds like that's still something you've got to do sequentially. So is that like your new bottleneck?
It is. I'd say it is the bottleneck. Yeah. Because even it's not like from my experience, like I see people online talking about like they have the bot running all night or whatever, they walk away and wait for it. It's like I never seen the bot like running for like that long. Maybe 20, 30 minutes is the most it would be executing something at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So in that time I'm just doing some other task. So you're context switching in that way, but you're also building the context of the product like in real time with the AI is what I've seen. So it's not like you get the full requirements out of the way and then you're in this implementation phase. Just like
Mm-hmm.
when you're working as a developer, you run into edge cases that you didn't anticipate. So the AI sometimes can even see those ahead of getting into the implementation phase if you're using the planning phases with the tooling. So it's still a lot of problem solving, like front loading the problem solving and then letting the syntax kind of just happen after that, and then just reviewing that the syntax matches, what you were expecting from what you were prompting it. So yeah, I think context is still the limitation, and I think most founders would agree with that as well. Like even when you're working with humans, getting the context out to everyone is the bottleneck.
What is the way to unbottleneck that? Like, is there a better way you're thinking of to help share that context faster and get that distributed amongst other people at the organization?
Well, one thing I've seen work, at least for me, is just building the memory internally. So whether that's um, in a repository or in your individual products. Right now, the way I've been doing it is having the planning documents, the architecture documents. Anything that I'm generating gets committed and versioned. So that way, if those things change or before it comes out, that's all in the repository. So you also have like a history of what happened, and I think that that history um, has helped save several hours of debugging where the AI would like make a change that it's already been told not to make, for
Right.
example. So those kinds of things build up and compound over time has been my experience. So it's like you kind of experience a lot of these like, oh my gosh, the AI is so dumb kind of things at first until you start to build up those guardrails, and then you start to have a smoother experience with it. So that's been how I've been working with it, is building that memory.
Got it. And so anybody else, for example, who would want to join for whatever you're helping build there, they can just install the same model you're using. They have the same context just from the sake of using that shared memory.
Yeah, any
That's your
person
current way of
or
sharing it.
bot. Yeah,
Got it.
or the agent itself, right? So when you like one of the big issues with using Claude Code, for example, is the context window that it has. So you want to be able to clear that context window in between the tasks that you're doing, and if you wipe its memory, you just start back from scratch again. It tries like 51
Yep.
states. You're always starting from zero. So being able to save all that memory that it can then go and find and like get the context that it needs specific to the tasks at hand without you having to remember and provide all of the context, which becomes extremely tedious to do. Um, yeah.
Have you? This is a little off, a side tangent. Uh, have you zoomed out even further and like added context around your different contexts? Like, for example, client A and client B, those are two different clients with their own context, but is that in its own folder of these are my clients? And so
Mhm.
you're basically tracking at a meta layer level what you're doing for different clients, and maybe you could find patterns in how you're reacting to each client and their needs.
Yeah. I mean, yes, exactly that. So I used to have like a general like meta prompt or like, pre-prompt or whatever that would wrap any instruction that I put no matter what repo or folder I was in. And I actually found that to be counterproductive because if any two clients had different needs, I would have to like counter
Mm,
the default meta. So I think kind of a better approach that I've used is just, I may have same defaults for the guardrails, and I'll just use that as a starting point, but then adapt it to each client. And then at that point, it's still within that folder. It's getting the meta context that it needs. So that's been how I work with it, and I found that to work in other things too. So even like with my starter kit, like my boilerplate software as an agency, I instead of having something that you install and I have to maintain that, I just drop it in, and then now we can build on top of it.
got it. Well, as far as different uh, tooling and different people you're working with, have you seen companies that have, like, for example, sometimes you'll see whenever you're at a meeting, it'll record everything in the meeting, and it can do a pretty good job at summarizing what happened, what the decisions were. Can you feed
Mhm.
that context back into a same folder as your coding? And it goes, oh, there was a meeting about that. Have you seen anyone doing
Yeah,
stuff like that
I
yet?
think you could. I think you would want, for the sake of like tokens and efficiency and not confusing, like or not like polluting the context, you would want to pull out that. So one structure I've seen that you could still do all of that with AI is you essentially have different AI agents and tasks and models and whatever for each of these purposes. And a lot of the meta frameworks, like known as harnesses, for the agents use those kinds of things nowadays. So they have like planning agents and orchestrator agents, right? And that are trained to kind of, or they're given a certain set of tasks to do in a specific way. That way they have just the context they need to execute that. So I think, to me, that's
Mm,
been this like that general strategy, just applying that everywhere you go has been the answer. Like if you're just, I think we talked about it in another episode about the kind of the
hmm
boomer. version of AI. Like if you're just like randomly chatting to it, like you're going to get very random outputs. You have to be very methodical, to kind of get the leverage that I think is truly valuable.
Yeah, and definitely the organization of different contexts is like the bare necessity, I think, for each of the clients. And even just random things in my life that I'm curious about, I'll just have it saved in a different context, and I'll swap
Hmm.
to that context whenever I'm trying to like, um, if I have any questions about a direction for somewhere to go in my life, versus like a career
Yeah.
thing or something like that.
Right.
Versus working for this particular client, which historically has had these issues, and so swapping those different contexts has been really useful for me because it can remember everything. Um, yeah, so
Have
different.
you found it changing anything like around your day to day, like as far as like around meetings or like ingesting requirements or like any of those types of
Oh
day to
yeah.
day things you don't really think about, but now you use a tool and it's like, well, I used to have to do this all the time, and now I don't really have to do that.
Well, one of the things that I've seen being used, one of them is in Slack. If there's like a thread
Mm,
going for some kind of bug, essentially, and the thread's gotten pretty long, you can use a
yeah.
tool that will basically generate a Jira story that will summarize all the main issues and then go ahead and create acceptance criteria and just boilerplate stuff. Occasionally, you have to go through there and flesh out some stuff, but it does a really great job at summarizing a thread that can get pretty lengthy, or some back and forth. Oh,
Yeah.
we should do this, we should do that, and then actually we're going to resolve to doing this instead. That's been a pretty useful one, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I've
Nothing
seen a
like
lot of
getting
people.
tagged on 100 reply thread, and
Yeah,
trying to catch up on
that's super
context.
annoying, right? I
Yeah.
usually go in there. I'll just turn off reply or turn off notifications for replies briefly,
Right.
and leave a note to go back to it because it's so distracting seeing my little
Right.
Slack thing jump. Um, but that's been a really useful one, and I've seen people use not necessarily just that tool to generate the Jira ticket, but sometimes just fleshing out the ticket itself. I've seen some product people will go through there, and a lot of times people will forget. Either they'll make a placeholder Jira story, which I hate, which is just a title, and then all the context is lost. Sometimes people will throw in
Right.
a Slack thread link to take me to a
Yep.
thread to read to figure out
Yeah.
what to
Here you go.
do.
You do the work.
That's right. That's really annoying.
Yeah.
So they'll use some tools to help make that faster and make it more obvious what needs to be done, and they'll go through and make the manual changes needed if it doesn't do a good job at summarizing it. But they'll also in the boilerplate that they use, it's almost like when people used to copy and paste like boilerplates in general
Yeah.
and then edit it. It'll explain things from the user perspective, which I
Right.
love when people say, as a user, or as a particular role, when
Hmm.
I go load this page and click this, I expect to see this.
Right.
Because when that's missing, that's the context is king thing you're talking about. When that's
Right.
missing, it's just a story to build a thing, and I need
Right.
to know why. Like, because I'm not a robot.
Right.
AI might
Yeah.
have all that context and it can do that,
Yeah.
but if we're in the field of entrepreneurship and fast moving um, startups, then you really need to be able to move quickly and build the right thing. And so when I start getting random bits of work
Yeah.
that tell me here's how you should spend your time and money, and there's no why there, then one, I have to spend time getting the why, and two, there's no reason to actually build that quite yet because I need to know the
Right.
why. We need to know, who's going to use this to allocate resources best. So having AI do a lot of that generation for not just the engineer but the product person, that just saves a ton of time in general. And like imagine every time you load a ticket, there's some missing information and you have to get more information. Now it doesn't do it perfect,
It's
but
friction. Yeah.
yeah, it's friction. Like instead of me having to go get clarity once, in the past I'm getting clarity like 7 times because people are going back and
Right.
forth, and there's leave a couple of comments on the Jira story itself. Maybe
Yeah.
we should do this. Actually, come to think of it, then suddenly, okay, this is not even ready for work yet.
Right. Right. You're blocked.
It might not solve the problem, but all those conversations go from 7 conversations to less than 7. I don't care if it's even 6. If you
Hmm.
reduce the amount of time that I'm context swapping, you are saving money, and we're moving
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked to a product team working on this very problem the other day. It was very interesting. We talked earlier about kind of the paradigm shift that could happen. They were mentioning you mentioned Slack, so it's what reminded me of it. their tool was trying to keep all of the context between the emails, the Slack threads, and the tickets wherever the work is happening. They wanted to then bring all of that to a centralized place to essentially kind of store all of the decisions, for that very same reason, that like keeping the decisions or keeping the context with the decision, so that whether you were a non-technical person or an engineering person, you could come back and look at the context on the decision. It was kind of like
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to call it a decision log on steroids because it was so much more than that, but that was the one. I use the decision log a lot in my agency work. So it felt like it was really trying to tackle that context and kind of decision problem. Yeah. So pretty interesting. Maybe we can bring them on sometime.
Well, to pivot a bit, how have you seen AI sentiment change? Because
Oh,
I've
sentiment. Yeah.
noticed, yeah, I've noticed sentiment amongst engineers versus other
Hmm.
communities like artists and musicians are
Mm.
wildly different when it comes to acceptance
Yeah.
of AI. And I get that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
one of them is more an efficiency thing, and the other one is trying to automate creativity, right?
Yeah.
And that's a
Hmm.
huge like step into the human essence. What does it mean to be us? What are we going to allow to not be us anymore? Have you ran into
Right.
any of that much with your role?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot. And I think, one comment I saw on the personal side, and then I'll move to the professional side. One comment I saw on the personal side around like the art and the writing was, we want, and I'm paraphrasing here, but we want AI to do our dishes and our laundry, not our art and our writing and our music, right? And it's like
Hmm.
what we got is the opposite. And it's like, so yeah, from the artist perspective and the writing perspective is especially, yeah, don't plagiarize. Be
Right.
creative, make your own work. Using AI as a writing tool, I think, is a much different thing than what I would say what we're doing in software engineering.
Yeah.
And I'd be happy to be argued on that, but I think having the AI generate code feels more to me like having it generate random math problems than it does generating a novel does. That doesn't
Right.
represent true creativity. So that's kind of my feeling on the creativity side. Anything you want to add to that before we go on the professional side, or does that
Yeah. Well,
represent you pretty well?
I'd say yeah, because like I don't think of myself as like such a brilliant person that I creatively solve all of my
Right,
programming problems in this beautiful way that people can look at my code and go, that's an Isaac thing. And maybe
right.
there's some people who do like, I mean, I've definitely looked at some code and I'm like, that's trademark John or whatever. But like, I
Yeah,
wouldn't call it creative for the sake of being like, we've got to code that style because it's such a beautiful John style.
right,
It's just more
right,
like, I know that's the way that person tends to solve problems, right? And
right.
really, in our cases, we were generating code to solve problems. And yes, there are creative ways to solve problems, but I don't go, our company is so human because of the clever ways that we decide to solve problems. I just think, okay,
Yeah,
let's all just try and find ways to solve the problems, and whatever one gets it done the fastest in the way that doesn't generate any tech debt or very little tech debt, let's go with that one. You can kind of like
right.
test them out. Um, so the sentiment again, like I said, like amongst engineers, generally speaking, let's adopt it because it just makes us go faster. It's like whenever you see somebody on horseback than like someone that invents a car, you can't be like, wow, this is destroying the horse community. I'm
Right.
sure somebody at some point was like sad that because they raised horses or whatever, and then now everyone's
Right,
using
right,
these mechanical cars and there's smog and yeah, there's trade-offs, but like
right,
you're going to lose that battle because the car is faster,
right.
and like you don't have to worry about raising
Yeah,
horses. Right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, you're touching on, I think, all the main points of the sentiment. In the
Yeah.
communities, it's the data centers coming in, and then now you have to
Right.
restrict your power and your water, and your water's dirty, and
All
so there's,
valid concerns. Yeah.
yeah, super valid concerns. Again, I understand it, but I think to your point, like, you're not going to stop it, and you're not going to win either by like not using it. So I think it's almost better to like fail forward in a way. Like, we'll find solutions to these problems, is the answer.
Well,
Um,
to be clear, my argument here is mainly put aside briefly all that it takes to make it work. Yes, it's
Right.
it's resource heavy for sure. But I'm saying in general, the technology being used in an engineer way, I don't think steps too much on human creativity to the point that it should offend people.
No.
I think we could take it,
No.
and I'm sure it does. I'm sure someone's gonna listen to me like it offends me entirely. I am not making the argument that I mean, and it sounds like kind of maybe you're leaning this way, but like the idea that this is just going to happen, you have to get used to it. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. That's not my argument right now. My argument right now is just purely like technologically, this is hard to say no to because the car is being invented
Right.
and we're moving faster. I do think
Right.
there's a huge problem with the data centers. I do think there's a huge problem with the resources. I think there's a ways to get around them. If you've seen like reports on energy use
Hmm.
with AI in general, energy we have it's gotten more efficient. It's still not
Yeah.
efficient, but it's gotten more. People are trying to make it more efficient because it's a
Exactly.
moneymaker. If you can make it more efficient and save that money, that's great.
Right.
But if you end up like we're getting off on a tangent, but if you end up building data centers and charging more people for the electricity it's used, that's a bad
Right.
thing. I am not for
Right.
that, but that's not my argument. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not just being like, just get over it. There's nuance there. There's
Yeah.
definitely nuance there.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Um,
Um,
on the
from your
the
perspective,
non-engineer
then?
side, go ahead.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Uh,
You go ahead.
I was laughing at this because I was thinking last night. We had this rehearsal for this music production that we're going to do this weekend. We're
Right.
doing a School of Rock thing, and they're going to play music for people at a local venue. And one of the people there had trouble with like crowd banter. Like usually, if someone's trying to tune a guitar,
Mm.
they're swapping out the bass. So there's like a little bit of dead space in between a different song starting. You want the person in front of the mic, usually the singer or anybody who's just near one, to like engage the crowd. Hey, who's having a good time tonight? Or to like tell a joke or
Right.
something to keep the crowd engaged. And so this person made the off comment that, and if you're having trouble thinking of good crowd banter suggestions, you can ask ChatGPT. And everyone was just giving her shit for it.
Oh
And
my
that's
gosh.
that's the point where it's touching nerves because it's like,
Right.
can't you just think of some things to say? But some of these people were just nervous, right? And they're like,
Right.
I don't know how to do crowd banter. I don't know funny jokes, and so this person was
Right.
honestly saying, "Hey, I was using it, and it helped me come up with some backup things to say, in case I'm like have stage fright, and I can't think anything. I've got I had some help generating these things." But the vitriol that came from just the idea that you can't be human for a moment and just come up with something fun to say to the crowd was so funny. But a lot of people were like, they gave her shit, but then later they were like, "Okay, we see what you're getting at. We know you're nervous."
Right.
But there's nuance there. Someone's not saying it to be
Hmm.
lazy. They're saying it because like I have problem engaging with people and being social, and this kind of helped me get through that hump. Maybe that's a good thing. But I was laughing at like if I go to my day job and I'm working with engineers, it's just like, oh, just let AI do it. And then if I go amongst musicians or anybody, and where it's like that human
Right.
aspect we don't want replacing
Right.
us, it's a very,
Yeah.
very different crowd, and you really have to read the room whenever you suggest these things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah. I've seen that too. And I mean, I've even seen there's, obviously even a few engineers that, feel like,
Yeah,
it should all be handwritten or, they can't possibly think like us and all this stuff. So, there's definitely that. No one wants to have the human aspect replaced, but I do want to replace the boring parts of my job, you know?
right. And this is kind of reminding me of there's actually an offended engineer that I brought up before who definitely doesn't like AI. This is one of those quote unquote rock star engineers that I met a long time ago. And I say quote unquote because he was incredibly good at writing, I mean, fast at writing code, but only if the acceptance criteria in the story was perfect. And then later,
Right.
if you delivered it and it wasn't the right thing, he was like, "That's what the story says," as like a checkmate to you. And you're like,
Right.
"Well, if you just read it and understood what we're getting at, you'd know the acceptance criteria. If you'd even worked with your team to understand the problem or talk to your product person, you'd have known that they were missing something. Like you have to be human and help them out here. You can't just take the ticket and
Right.
run with it because that's what we can automate. If you have perfect acceptance criteria and a perfect thing that needs to happen, and you give that to AI, yes, it can do it. And this person's like, AI is replacing us. And I'm like, because you won't adapt to your team and
Right.
actually like, this is the thing. That's the least part, the least human part of all this is the actual computer
Exactly.
generate like doing stuff, right? The most
Right.
human part is how
Yeah.
you're engaging with the customer and understanding what their problem point is, because that's why they're giving you money. Please make my problem go away. Oh, let me understand your problem. I will work with you. And then your product people in your
Exactly.
team. Like,
Yeah.
how can we solve the problem for this person in a way that doesn't bleed our company out of money and we go bankrupt? Can we make money
Right.
off solving this problem? Can we, this person who wants to give us $9 a month for this product, are they going, oh man, that's a steal. I will give you $20 a month if you can solve this problem for me. That's the creativity. That's the human element, to me at least.
Exactly.
All the other
Yeah.
stuff, generating code, like maybe they find such great art in their code and they're one of those people who's like, this is the way I I code. Look how beautiful and
Right.
human my zeros and ones are. I don't know. Maybe they're like
Right.
that, but that's a dying thing. Like, you've really got to work with people. Like, if
Yeah.
anything, AI is in the ironically, maybe not the music space or the art space, but in
Right.
the engineering space, is taking all these really nerdy computer logic people, and it's forcing them to be more human in an ironic kind of
Right.
fashion.
Right. I mean, your job as an engineer is not to write code based on the tickets. It's to help solve technical problems for the company, right? So like if you're
Yes,
thinking
yeah,
more in that alignment, it's like the ticket itself doesn't even matter. Like that's not your job. The job is to solve the problem for the company. And so if you solve the wrong problem for the company out of spite or whatever, like you're undermining the project, like you're undermining your own role and then acting like you're
right.
this noble thing, right? And it's like that's not being a good teammate. Like there's so many things wrong with that, but
And to your point too, with how that percentage has changed, like the percentage of actual
right.
program, mine has been severely reduced to the point where a lot of my code generation, like a lot of the boilerplate, I can get done by AI, and I still have to fine tune here and there. But that
Hmm.
means I'm communicating with my team a lot more, because I'm either
Right.
getting to a hiccup in the story that wasn't accounted
Hmm.
for, so I got to talk to somebody, or I'm closing the
Right.
ticket and there's another one to work on, and I can talk to somebody else. So what's the next big problem? What's the next customer complaint? So I've gone from being like heads down, really in it for 5 hours and not talking to anybody, to being heads down for an hour at a time and talking to a lot more people.
Right.
So it's
Right.
still like it. On the flip side, like I'm saying, is like my day gets more social from AI
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
All right. Well, have we exhausted the topic for today? I know we've got more AI related topics in the future to touch on, but I think this one's mainly just about how organizations have shifted. Got any
Yeah.
last
I touched on
wrapping
mine.
thoughts?
Yeah. Good
All
to go.
right. Well, this has been another thrilling episode of Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And Dustin Ray.
Till next time.